Gonna replace the rear swing arm today. Just like that, the swing arm is out. We can pop the new one in. Swing arm is this part right here, and we're replacing it because it's bent. If you saw the purchase video on this bike, you remember how bad it was. So we're just gonna take the entire swing arm off, which involves removing the rear fender, dropping the rear tire, popping the new one back on. Should be good to go. We're gonna start taking this rear fender off, these lights off, and see what else we need to do. Probably the exhaust and some shocks, but start with the fender. The back little seat pad just had one bolt there, and then these had two bolts that you have to get up underneath there. But that allows you to pop this fender off. You don't actually have to remove these side bolts. I was trying to disconnect the lights back there and I couldn't. Followed the wires back up to the battery, and they've got these little color-coded connectors. You have to disconnect them from there, and then you can slide them through, because they go through the fender here, and you slide them through and you can take them off this rear portion. Now that that's out of the way, I think the next thing I'm going to do is just take these shocks off. Probably leave the top bolt in and just take the lower off. You don't need to do this to take the swing arm off, but we're going to get rid of these passenger foot pegs anyways because they're kind of pointless. That one's going to come off, but this one actually serves a purpose. It holds the exhaust, and I need to take the exhaust off. But if you see, there's this little bolt that runs through this side. I'm going to take the peg off just so it matches the other side, but we're going to leave this bracket on. Take the exhaust off. Ashley's still going on the other side there. She's gonna start loosening the chain tensioner there. The muffler's off. You don't need to take the whole exhaust off, just the clamp right there and the one bolt right there. I'm gonna delete this like I said I would, and then we'll start working on the shock. Ashley took the chain tensioner nut off here, and look how bent this bolt is. That's a problem. That's a big problem. That's what adjusts the tightness of your chain. So this thing should be very, very loose, and it is. Good thing we got a new bolt somewhere in that list of parts over there. This is what it should look like when you take it off. You just take that nut off, and then you can get a little tool in here and adjust your chain tension. Put the nut back on to lock it into place, but should not look like that one. So we got the shocks off, hindsight being what it is. Probably should have taken the rear tire off first. But the bushing on this one is stuck on the little end there. See, no longer in the shock. So I think I'm gonna have to maybe get a wrench on that. And since we're working with the benefit of hindsight, if you didn't take this shocks off first, you would have wanted to disconnect the brakes. You just have one bolt there and one bolt there. That caliper will pop off, and then you scoot into this little cover here, and this bolt should take the swing arm out. Rear tire comes off, and it's just a little axle slides out, and that's all there is to that. Now we can get the swing arm off. And that swing arm bolt, it's just, you got a nut over here on the clutch side, and then you got one of those little hex bolts over there on the brake side. Well, this is a bummer. We got to take the brake line off the swing arm here, and it runs through this piece, so the only way to feed your brake line through is to take it off, which means you're going to have to bleed your brakes when you're done with this job. I also had to do the vent hose here, and then the little master cylinder. And when you take the master cylinder off, it's got this little nut, and gotta take the battery off because the nut slides right in there, so it turns into quite the job at this point. Well, we got that long bolt shaft thing out of there from the swing arm, but we have a new problem. Need a special tool to get this out because the swing arm has to come over and then drop out, and looks like just an extra layer of security there, so I'll let you know what tool I end up using. I made a whole video on how to make this tool, but basically I just ended up cutting up a socket, and I'm gonna take this thing out now. And now you can see just a little better how that all fits together. It's just called a lock nut, I guess, which is confusing because lock nuts are called many different things for many different forms, but this tool here cost me, I don't know, it came out of a set, so $1 instead of $60, and it worked like a charm. Used our little tool that we made here. Again, other video has details on how to make that, and we were able to loosen this bolt just enough to clear the swing arm here. So now we should be able to just pull the swing arm over and back out. From the rear, it's gonna go over and out. Got our new swing arm. Just take that and maybe hold it up there with one set of hands and tighten this pivot bolt with another set of hands. Maybe. Swing arm has a little bushing here, and if you pull this bushing out, you've got some needle bearings down in there. So good idea to just grab some grease and re-grease the needle bearings before you install it. And that side's done, so we can flip it over. This side has another little bearing. Oop. Dropped it in the grease. And deep in there you got the ball bearings, so you gotta grease those as well. This is how we did this. We put the bolt in from the clutch side all the way through, then back out just a little bit, while somebody was kind of holding on to this, get it all lined up, and then I torqued this down to 50 foot-pounds. No idea if that's correct. But the bolt that holds the swing arm in slides in and out with some relative ease, just a bit tight, which I think is what we want. And if we move this up and down, we're not seeing any play in those bearings, and that's also what we want. Now I'll install this with that little tool we made, and I think I'm gonna go 50 foot-pounds on this as well. Did 50 foot-pounds on this as well, and look, my marks are fairly lined up as well, which tells me we're probably in the vicinity of correct. Same thing on the bolt. I'm gonna get some grease up the shaft just a little bit so it slides in and out easier. Bolt here is indexed, so it's got the hex. You got to line it up with that hex bolt in there, the little recess. After getting that bolt all the way in, went to the nut on the other side, and I did 70 foot-pounds on this bolt. Again, I'm making up these numbers as I go. That was all a really good practice run, but I forgot to put the chain over the swing arm. It rides on this guide up here. Ashley just asked me, how do we get the chain above this? And well, you have to do that on the install. That's a bummer. Well, I learn and you watch so you don't have to make my mistakes. The bolt can actually be used to tighten that hex key, so you don't have to go and destroy one of your hex tools. 50 foot-pounds, then the lock nut, then put the bolt back in, nut on the other side, 70 foot-pounds. So 50, 50, 70. Now that we got the chain over the swing arm like it's supposed to be, we can rehook up our vent tube. And after the vent tube's in place, we're gonna slide our master cylinder back up, drop the bolt, put it in place, but don't actually install it because we still have to bleed the brakes. And so we're gonna need to get into this master cylinder later. Got our brake line hooked up again. That bolt down there, you might have to bend this guy out to put him back in. And then one of the things that I like to do when I do brake lines is paint the side of the bolt that has a hole, because that's the side that you need to line up with your brake line. And that's how you know how tight you need to make the bolt, is just until that aligns. Once that's aligned, you're done. Got the shocks kind of back in place. The bushing on this one, remember, we couldn't get off, so we ended up buying new shocks. These have about 20,000 miles on them anyways. Stripped the bolts, so I had to just make some adjustments, use a death wheel, and just a wrench to get that guy back off, and so I'll have to get a new bolt. But don't worry about all that. That's irrelevant to the swing arm job. You probably shouldn't have to worry about them. Now we can just install the rear tire. Tires installed. We set our chain tension. If you don't know how to do that, it's pretty easy. You just adjust on each side equally. There's marks on the side of the swing arm that tell you where you're at, and you want to be within the range. Here, if you're too far in the red, your chain is bad and stretched, and it'll tell you how much free play you need. And that's about all there is to it. We still have the fender to put on and button a few things up. Put the brake caliper back on. We'll make a video on how to bleed those brakes, but that's the swing arm. A few other projects on this we're going to have to do, but not today.